home. We are WNST, Johnson, Baltimore, and Baltimore Positive. We are positively into the football season. It's still fake football season. We're going to get to the real stuff soon enough. And I'm reaching into my bag of tricks and calling on some old friends because I haven't had a lot of football conversations because we're almost like a baseball town now. So much so that when the Cheats Roast come to town the 23rd, Luke and I will be gathering at Fadley's for a delicious crab cake. All of it brought to you by our friends at the Maryland Lottery. We'll have the Gold Rush Sevens doublers to give away, and our friends at Liberty Pure Solutions, as well as Jiffy Lube Multicare, putting us out on the road, getting Luke to training camp, getting Luke to Camden Yards, and maybe getting the Orioles out of second place, first place, wherever we are. One thing will not happen. Nothing really significant is going to happen until the Ravens get together with the Chiefs to kick off the season. This guy's kicked off lots and lots and lots of seasons, from the fighting city of Philadelphia and brotherly love out to St. Louis, where he ushered one team out and another team in, now out in the desert. And Howard Balzer joins us here. He is a Sirius XM. He does a whole bunch of really cool off-season things to get people ready for the football season, and he's a legend in my mind. And you're still voting for Hall of Fame, right, Howard? They didn't take that away from you yet, right?
Not yet. This will be the coming class. Well, we just inducted, obviously, a class in Canton, and that was my 20th year as a selector. And so now I'll be entering 21 because we're already in the process of selecting next year's class. So it's never ending and always on, always on the go.
Howard, I'll say this to you. We got Yonda and Suggs up. And I was going to save that to the end. We're going to do Lamar, and do Mahomes, and do all that, and off-season comings and goings and Derrick Henry. But since you are on the committee, everyone here is just convinced they're both going to just walk into the Hall of Fame first ballot. I want you to sort of set the ledge for Ravens fans here in regard to the greatness of John Ogden, the greatness of Ray Lewis, the greatness of Ed Reed, and then the greatness of Yonda Suggs, which is a different level of great. I think it's sort of like, is Cal Ripken a Hall of Famer? Yes. Is Mike Messina? He might have to wait his turn. I don't know where Yonda and Suggs are perceived in your room, as well as the whole room and the body of the electors. And I know so many of you, but my gut is there's already a dozen guys waiting in line before these guys even get to the rope, right?
Exactly. And I think every fan base thinks the way the Ravens do. And when one of their guys come up, oh, they're first ballot guys. Well, it's awful hard to be a first ballot guy. And the reality of the numbers, like you said, are that every year you have 15 finalists and 5 advance to be in the Hall of Fame. And that means you've got 10 others that are coming back the next year and have been waiting for a long time. The only time all 10 don't is when someone times out, basically, and enters the abyss of the seniors pool. And so, I mean, last year, for example, Antonio Gates was a first-time eligible guy, and many people thought, oh, lock, he's going forward, no problem, and he didn't make it. And there's a guy that certainly had the credentials to be a first ballot guy. So point is, it is hard. And I do think that Yonda will be a Hall of Famer at some point. Terrell Suggs, probably, but who knows? Like you said, you never know what the whole room thinks.
But the other thing, you feel more strongly about Yonda than you do Suggs. You do. And you're an outside perspective. I feel similarly. I feel like there were a lot of guys that did what Suggs did and did it well, and he was one of them. I feel like Yonda was a different level in regard to Yonda will get in before Suggs will get in, I think, if I had to bet.
Yeah, no, I think that too. Now, does being a guard affect it? Who knows? I mean, we just went through, Nestor, a process, if you will, of a whole bunch of offensive linemen that I don't think, there was Kevin Mawai, and there was Steve Hutchinson, and there was Alan Faneca, and there was Tony Baselli, and I think I might be forgetting one other guy. But bottom line is they all had to wait. And no matter how good they were. And it's just normally what happens. A certain amount of that is because they were all up as finalists and in that cave, at the same time. But again, we also have next year's first-time eligibles. We have Adam Vinatieri, and we have Eli Manning and Luke Kuechly. So there's a bunch of first-time eligibles, and they probably all are not going to make the final 15, much less make the final 5. And then you have guys like, Torrey Holt, who's been eligible for 10 years already. This will be his 11th year of eligibility. Reggie Wayne, 6th year of eligibility. Jared Allen has been, a finalist now several years in a row.
You make the case for Holt being having your
I,
St. Louis roots.
I do. I do. I'm the president. I'm the presenter, and I'm still. It's interesting. I'm still listed. I'm listed officially as the selector for the Los Angeles Rams, which kind of is that's a little bit of a gut punch, quite honestly. But
I have a feeling that's not elected by Stan Kroenke at this point. You and he probably aren't, like this. I'm thinking
probably not. But a lot of that is because they haven't been able to identify anyone in Los Angeles that would be on the committee. And so that's the way it's been. Perhaps that'll change someday and I'll jump back to being an at-large guy. But anyway, it's a very difficult process. People don't look at it objectively. I get it because they're fans, and that's the way it is. But it's difficult. And I always laugh at this, Nestor, because people will say when the class is announced, a lot of times it almost seems like there's more emphasis or more talk about those who didn't get in. And you'll hear comments about, oh, the committee doesn't respect that guy. He has something against him. They don't like him and all that. And I say,
Art Modella had that case. I definitely had that case.
That one's probably that is true about that. But generally, we're not voting on that. And the other point is, if the majority of people didn't like a guy, and that was truly what what you were voting on, the bottom line is it's hard to be a finalist. I mean, I've never heard anybody say that. It's hard to become one of those 15 finalists. And just that, to me, shows the respect that the committee has for those guys that make it that far. It doesn't mean that there's not respect for the other guys that didn't make the 15, but it just comes down to a vote. And the thing I've always said about the vote, all the levels of it, voting to 25 semifinalists, then voting to 15, then a reduction to 10, then a reduction to 5, which ends up being the class normally. No one ever knows, let's say, cutting to 5, who was 6th? How many votes did they miss by? Probably not very many.
Well, this it's for the Art Monks and I guess the Tory Holts that wait forever, that the numbers never change. They always say that. And look, my cousin got in last year of eligibility as well, back in the day, 40 years ago, into the Baseball Hall of Fame. And, we've seen a lot of players sort of wait or fall off the ballot, right? I mean, is there anybody you go and fight for that fell off a ballot? Because Tory Holt starts to sound like it might not happen for him.
My sense is it probably will. I can't say when. I get that question all the time, especially from my old friends in St. Louis. Last year, in this last year's vote, the year before, when it was Holt, Wayne, and Andre Johnson as the finalists, and all of them made the initial reduction to 10. And so I thought then, one of them was going to go in because all 3 of them made it this far, and it'll be good. I'm hoping it's Tory Holt, but if it's one of the other guys, that's a positive because one of them exits, that group of 3. Well, none of them got in. And the reason being most likely is because you had 3 guys out of the other 5 that didn't make it to the 5, and they probably split votes. So some are voting for Holt, some are voting for Wayne, some are voting for Johnson, and none of them got enough to advance. This particular year, which we just enshrined Andre Johnson, he and Tory Holt made it to the reduction to 10. Reggie Wayne did not.
Yeah, I was going to say, if I have to rate them, I call that Johnson, Holt, Wayne. That's how I see that.
So that's why it gives me hope that it will happen. And one of my arguments, and it doesn't say he's a Hall of Famer, right? But I'll definitely make the point. What better year to elect him than at the 25th anniversary of that 1999 Rams Greatest Show on Turf team? And yes, it's been 25 years. Hard to believe.
Crazy, dude. I was there that night, walking out of the dome, catching the St. Louis Transit out to the airport, watching the Tony Dungy walk off beaten. You know what I mean? Like, that was a night to be in St. Louis. I'll tell you that. And it never got any better than that, did it?
I assume you're talking about the NFC Championship game.
Yeah.
Which was an unbelievable game that the Buccaneers had that Greatest Show pretty much under control for most of the game. A game in which, by the way, Tory Holt left the game early because he got hit so hard that he was actually spitting blood. But he still came back and played, but he wasn't quite himself. And so, yeah, so that's 25 years. I'm always,
Who hit him? Was it Lynch? Who hit him? One of those guys, right?
I don't remember who hit Torrey Holt on that particular play. I probably have to ask him, about that someday. But the crazy thing, you talk about moments, is when Kurt Warner hits Ricky Prohl for the winning touchdown on a blitz, which you wonder why the Bucks blitz, because they were getting pressure with 4 all game. That was Ricky Prohl's the entire season, regular season playoffs. That was his only touchdown reception of the entire year. But it's interesting. You mentioned Tampa Bay, and Warren Sapp was playing for the Buccaneers. Talk about 25 years. Several years ago in Canton for the celebration, doing a show for Sirius, and was interviewing Warren Sapp. And I said, boy, you were enshrined, I forget exactly, let's say 7 years ago at that point. I said, time flies, doesn't it? And here's what Warren Sapp said. I've never forgotten it, and I've repeated it many times. He said, well, I've always said the days drag, years fly, and decades zoom. And we all laughed. And then I thought about it, and I said, man, is he right? Decades zoom. And here we are, 2.5 decades from that Rams Super Bowl season, and numerous decades from a lot of other things in the history.
Hey, same with us with Purple Rain 1 and Trent Dilfer and Ray Lewis and Brian Billick and
that was only 1 year later.
Yeah, we've lost Goose. I mean, we lost Jacoby Jones here a couple weeks ago. He was on the second team at 40 years old. So Howard Balzer's here. We still have him. You still have him. The NFL still has him. Sirius XM still has him. So while I'm on this Hall of Fame thing, because we'll get to Lamar, we'll get to the season and all that, I saw, and look, the offseason's long with all this, who's the number 1 player, and who's the top 100 this, and, all of the conversations that happen, and we're still a month from playing real football at this point. Someone said Mike Tomlin is a Hall of Fame coach. And, I like Mike Tomlin. I like him a lot more than I like Harbaugh. But that would make John Harbaugh a Hall of Fame coach. And then I brought this up with Luke earlier in the week. He's like, well, Cowher's in the Hall of Fame. And I'm thinking, well, then Pete Carroll's got to get in the Hall of Fame. I mean, what's the bar on coaching now and championships? I had always sort of worked under the assumption that Harbaugh better win another one, especially after blowing the timeout in New England with Cundiff out there shanking a kick in the championship game. This time around, running the ball 3 times in a championship game and losing at home to Patrick Mahomes. Like, I don't know. Harbaugh, to me, feels like he has to win another one. So does Tomlin. I have felt all along like you got to win 2 if you're a coach.
You have to, because Tony Dungy won, I believe, just one. There's a lot of coaches that Dick Vermeil won only one, and I think we get
Cowher.
Yeah, I'm in the group, and I might be. Everybody has their own feeling about it. I think certainly winning is a big part of it. To me, it's the entire body of work. And I mean, heck, Marv Levy and Bud Grant got in, and they never won one. They went to 4, but they never won one.
I was going to say, if you give me Bill Cowher, Marv Levy, I'll take Marv Levy over any of those cats. You know what I mean? I'll take Schottenheimer too, by the way. Throw him in there. He didn't win.
No, totally Schottenheimer. I agree 100%. And here's the thing I always say. To me, it's the total body of work. And certainly if you win multiple Super Bowls, if your team wins multiple Super Bowls, that's obviously tremendous. But it's damn hard to win a Super Bowl. You get into the postseason and you're one and done. And as we've seen, anything can happen in the postseason. And I don't think it should be taken against a guy if they haven't won multiple ones. That's just the way I feel. And I always remember this. Your good friend and Brian Billick, I'll never forget a comment he made that summer after the Ravens won in 2000. And someone asked him, why is it so hard to repeat as a Super Bowl champion? And Brian said, well, one of the reasons it's so hard to win just one, much less to win a second. Because when you get into the playoffs, you're playing the best teams. The best teams are in the postseason. And as we've seen, basically anything can happen on one of those days. I mean, heck, Andy Reid was considered a borderline, Hall of Fame guy until finally his team won the Super Bowl. Now it's like a lock. Now he's a slam dunk.
But he's a great example of being on another team and having another chance. We're like Peyton going out to Denver. If he could win there is something about that. And then there's something about just keeping your job a long time, like Cowher did. Like, I don't want to say Dungy. Dungy went two different places, two different Super Bowls, two different teams. I mean, Harbaugh and now Tomlin, to some degree, have been there so long. They're doing it with two different generations of players, two different sets of quarterbacks, all of that. And there's a point where Brady and Mahomes, over the last 20 years, have made this feel like it's easier than it is.
Totally agree, 100%. And we could get into a long debate about Tom Brady, who is essentially, is acclaimed by virtually everyone as the greatest of all time.
I think he's a cheater, by the way, and that's where I am on that. Much like the baseball thing, like to me, I have a feeling he was serially cheating. I have very little doubt about the footballs just being the inflated football being one of the things we know about. That's all.
Aside from that, he gets that acclaim because the teams he was on won a lot of Super Bowls. And so all of a sudden he's the greatest of all time. Is that how you rate an individual player in the ultimate team sport that there is? If you really go back and look at some of those Super Bowl victories, several of those games he didn't play that well. But there's a lot of reasons. He
also did not have a lot of Hall of Famers around him either in that era, which makes it's kind of like Marino. The players around him. Kurt Warner had special players around him, a lot of them.
He did, especially in St. Louis. And so, but my point is that it's a team sport and teams win or lose. There's nothing, Nestor, that drives me nuts more than when I hear a commentator. And I say it at times, and I catch myself when a commentator, whoever, talks about a quarterback and said, he won that game, or he won the Super Bowl, or he lost. Well, no, his team lost. It wasn't him. I mean, do we think less of Kurt Warner because of the Super Bowl when he was with Arizona? And they went ahead late in the game, and then Ben Roethlisberger took the Steelers down the field to win that game. Is that a knock on Kurt Warner? I mean, there's so many aspects that go into winning or losing a game, and I think sometimes that's lost sight of.
I brought that up about Flacco, that if Lee Evans caught that ball or Cundiff hits the kick and they go to Indianapolis and win, Flacco might have two Super Bowls and Eli Manning might only have one. And then you would look back and say, okay, where's Flacco? Because he was not a Hall of Fame player in the way that people would probably pick on Kurt Warner, although I saw Kurt Warner play. I think Kurt was a more effective regular season quarterback than Joe. But again, a guy like Flacco could have had two. Howard Balzer's our guest. He's out in Arizona. Howard, what else are you doing besides SiriusXM? Give me the whole, because I know you do season previews. You do a whole bunch of work inside and around the NFL.
I don't know if Lindy's magazine is still on the newsstands. It got on the newsstands at the beginning of June and probably might be sold out a lot of places. But if people still want to get one, they can call Lindy's office. Just look it up, lindysports.com. You can also order online. I've been the senior editor of that magazine now for 33 years. And so I've been doing that.
I think we've had it around here all 33 years. There's a little bit of a guidebook that was on the desk of every radio host at WNST in the 90s and the aughts. And I know Luke's a contributor as well.
Yes, he is. And then here in Arizona, I contribute to Cards Wire through the USA Today network, writing and doing some podcasting for covering the Arizona Cardinals. So those are the main things that I'm doing right now, and managed to keep busy at my advancing age.
Well, listen, this is where I wanted to start the conversation with you, but I never know where it's going to go. I get a cup of Royal Farms coffee here, and I get going with you. We can go all night because I love you, and we didn't even talk. We could probably talk baseball another hour if we had to, especially with the Orioles doing what they're doing, and your old Phillies and either Cardinals. You come from a baseball town. Lamar. I want to talk Lamar with you because you mentioned players and teammates and where they are. I don't need to tell you about the racism in the sport, the perception of running quarterbacks in the sport, the perception of slight running quarterbacks, the perception of Lamar, hey, kid, you'll make a nice wide receiver, go out and split wide, you got speed, go do that, that he heard probably in Pompano Beach when he was a kid. Where Lamar is, 2 MVPs, not just whether he's going to be a Hall of Famer or not, but the notion of what he needs to do, and to your point, the horses and courses of the Ravens saying, we'll take that kid. At that time, Marshall Yanda was a part of the team and Ronnie Stanley, and they had a stand-up, drop-back, Super Bowl MVP quarterback they were paying a lot of money to. We're going to change the entire system. And John Harbaugh is going to talk about revolution, and Eric DeCosta is going to get together with Mike Elias and Sig Mejdel and a bunch of the Yankee nerds and talk about analytics and bringing the analytics of baseball to football and how we analyze the game and the value of a run and the value of a pass and the value of a play, and the value of a quarterback that you have to scheme 11 on 11, not 11 on 10, because you're not afraid of him running. It's changed the game. It's changed everything. I don't know if Lamar's a Hall of Famer, if he doesn't win another playoff game. I really don't know. But I do know this has changed the game, and it's amped it up from where you saw Steve Grogan and Fran Tarkenton and then Steve Young try some things. And then McNair came and, Randall Cunningham could run a little bit. But these generational things, you're out in Arizona with a quarterback out there. This has changed everything about the game, the tectonic plates, and probably that alone makes Lamar a Hall of Famer, and it might make a Harbaugh Hall of Famer if he could certainly get Lamar to a Super Bowl, but doing it this way, a lot of the old school people said this couldn't be done this way.
Continue to say it, and I think it's to me, it's not as much about just the fact that running the football, because I think everyone has come to accept that that is a way that you can have a quarterback and you can win. The problem is when those guys get hurt. And that's the thing, is keeping them healthy. It's hard enough to keep a quarterback healthy when they're not runners. You mentioned Steve Young. I mean, he was sometimes more of a runner than a passer, and Bill Walsh coached him into going through his reads, doing that. And if you need to run, but don't make that be the first thing you do. And so, hey, I remember when Michael Vick came into the league, and everyone said, well, this is going to revolutionize football. So it's been going on for.
And by the way, I was at the preseason game where Dallas Thomas snapped his leg in half. I was sitting up at that Hooters eating wings right above the end zone in the Georgia Dome. And you talk about changing a franchise, nothing changes anything like Lamar getting hurt, right? And last year it was all contract, and then he made good on that with the MVP, and then didn't make good on that in January, and here we go again. Howard, they don't have an offensive line right now. Other than the center, they don't know who's playing, really.
That is so much what determines offensive success in the NFL. And so, Justin Fields has moved on from the Bears, obviously, to the Steelers, and he had some injuries. You mentioned Kyler Murray. It's all about staying healthy and getting a guy comfortable. Being as much about being both, but still being able to throw the ball from the pocket, being successful, being accurate. And I think Lamar has improved along those lines as a passer, and he hasn't, I know he's got the, tight end Mark Andrews, but he hasn't had a lot of great consistency with the receivers. I think that's getting better, certainly, and it makes the Ravens, a heck of a team. But I think that in terms of people thinking it doesn't work, I think it's always in the back of a coach's mind. We can't get this guy injured. We can't get this guy injured. And so every time the quarterback runs, the coach sometimes probably deep down cringes, saying, oh, I just hope he's able to get up, after this. And so that becomes a big part of it. And then you look at, Patrick Mahomes, a good example. I mean, he'll run now and then, but it's certainly not with the with the number of times that Lamar will run or some of those other quarterbacks. I mean, Russell Wilson earlier in his career ran a whole lot more than near the end of his career, but that was certainly a part of his game. A big part of it is learning when to get down. But like you said, those 2 seasons when Lamar got hurt at the end of the year, that just made it awfully difficult for that team to win. So we'll have to, in terms of Hall of Fame and all those things, we'll have to see where his whole career goes. But the guy's putting together certainly a career where he will be considered, and we'll see where it plays out. But again, you look at those quote pocket quarterbacks, the Peyton Mannings and Dan Fouts, and guys like there were people saying, well, this will change the game so much that it's going to go totally away. Well, it's never going to go totally away from those type of quarterbacks. But bottom line is, whatever you got to protect them. You've got to have that offensive line to protect them. And that has become one of the hardest things to do, Nestor, in the NFL with the offensive line, because of free agency, guys move on, because of injury, you get instability, because of the lack of hitting. in training camp and the regular season. Some offensive, they're just not really ready to play in the trenches of what goes on down there. You start getting some injuries in your offensive line, and your offense is cooked, no matter who you got at quarterback and at the skill positions.
I think we saw that with Cincinnati Bengals a couple years ago. Chiefs had the same problem when they played Tom Brady. Rams, same problem. Howard Balzer is here. He's covering the great game of football. We've talked a lot of baseball around here. We're ramping up for football season. Howard, I wanted to throw the Lamar thing at you in that way, because you go to the Hall of Fame game every year. You're out in Canton. You're one of the electors out there. The year that they put Ray in was the year that Lamar got drafted. And Luke and I attended. We had bus trip out there. We sat up top of that game, and that they were remodeling the stadium right around then. And it was Lamar's first game, and Flacco was still on the team at that time, and Flacco was going to be the quarterback. And this was the 5th game. They were playing the Bears. I think they were putting Urlacher in too, right? So I remember when it was August. It was like July almost, right? And he's running into linebackers, like just the formation. And that whole year, it was like watching the old metallic football game by Mattel, where the players, the electronic game where they'd all run into each other.
Electric football. Yeah.
Electric football, right? Which you're more familiar with. My generation could never figure that damn thing out. Still can't. Buzzing all over the place. That night, I cringed at Luke, and I'm like, he runs into linebackers. I don't want my quarterback running into linebackers. Now we're 6 years in. We're $300 million into this. We're one championship game and some playoff. 1 out of every 3 years, he gets broken in half and can't play. And before Chad Steele threw me out after 26 years of covering the team, this is my 3rd season of being excommunicated while they discriminate against me and allow my Caucasian employee access. One of my final questions that really pissed Harbaugh off, he got the jugulars all going when he got off the podium. Lamar ran the ball 21 times in an overtime game against the Minnesota Vikings, and they had to play 4 days later on the road against Miami. And I asked him before he got off the podium, he said, Lamar ran the ball 21 times today, John. Is that sustainable? And I'm just expecting to say, hey, dude, we won the game. I was expecting to give me some stock answer, not be mad at me. But it was like, how dare you notice that he ran the ball 21 times? Now, history would say he played 4 days later poorly and never was seen again that year. In that season. He was gone forever after that. There is a point where if I am in that position of risk reward management, you said something that I don't think anybody said here, Howard, about 3 minutes ago. You said there will always be room in the game for a 6'3" quarterback that throws the football, because in the end, yeah, it's nice your quarterback can run, and they used to call it by the way, Flacco insulted. He called it a gadget gimmick. He called it gimmick football. What were the Dolphins ran that? What was that Dolphins offense they ran for 5 minutes?
Yeah. What did they call it?
They had a name for that Dolphins offense, whatever. The running back's going to be your quarterback for 3 minutes. I don't know, Howard. Like, the pendulum is swung where all these young athletic kids, and especially African-American kids, are being given the ball at Pop Warner all the way through. And now Lamar is a bright light after Vic was a light that went awry. And you have one in Arizona Justin Fields, all of this generation of players that we're not uncomfortable anymore with them running into line. I still am. You pointed out that if you try doing that 160, 180 times a year, your quarterback's going to get broken in half. Now, that being said, Howard, for 3 years, Luke has laughed at me when I've said, they need Derrick Henry. They need Derrick Henry. It's almost like DaCosta was listening. And the Gus Bus and the drafting of Dobbins, and his knee got ripped up in a preseason game down in D.C. I think Derrick Henry's a game changer, because I don't think Lamar is going to run 170, 180 times this year. Maybe I'm wrong. It's still their best play. Their best play is Lamar off tackle, picks up 34 yards somehow. You know what I mean? Like, that is still the most explosive, maddening, frustrating thing for defensive players. It's demoralizing for defensive players when he does that once a quarter, but they got to be careful. And that being said, I love Derrick Henry. I think if they had the offensive line they had a couple of years ago with a Yandon and this and that, if they can figure that out, he's got a lot of weapons. They can be really good this year, Howard.
I think they should be very good. And that division, probably top to bottom, is arguably and probably is the best in the NFL. But excuse me, the key word you said is sustainable, and that's what everyone wonders about, especially as the player gets older, and even if they're able to stay relatively healthy. What happens when they start nearing 30, and all of a sudden there's different. If you get a little injury, it's a little harder to come back. Is that overall sustainable? But like I said, you look at the league now, and you've got Joe Burrow, you've got Justin Herbert, and you've got quarterbacks like that are very successful, and there has to be some mobility. You have to be able to escape the pass rush, but in the passing game, those that'll, like I said, it'll never go away. It doesn't mean there's not going to continue to be those other guys, and then we'll see the teams that that take a chance with it. You look at this year's draft, right? You got Caleb Williams. He can run around a little bit, but he's not a runner. You have Blake May. Jaden Daniels is the runner. I question, Jaden Daniels. I mean, his biggest part of his game in college was running the football. And he's a good passer, but the big thing was running the football. Let's see what he does now that he's at the NFL level, and see if he can sustain it. So it's always interesting to see, and you just have to let it play out and see what happens.
Last thing for you, as an excommunicated media member that's still in the media somehow, and the league signed on for this, Howard. I've been thrown out of Radio Row, and I haven't touched anything in 2 years. So, the billionaire class and the people that run this league, and the way every team now has its own hard knocks edited and sanitized by the general manager, the coach, the owners. You've seen this thing where this nice, community-minded Midwesterner attached to the Walmart family would buy the Rams and, oh yeah, move them to LA. So you've been a part of that. You've been affected by it. I mean, your life was uprooted by it for what you did for a living. I talk about my woes in a couple of weeks of not being allowed the ability to work and do my job the same as everybody else in the marketplace. But the people that own these teams, and the new guy that just bought the baseball team here, and the new guy that just bought the football team that literally appeared drunk on ESPN to begin his ownership last year. Thoughts about where sports is going at this point, and where the media is going in all of this? Because the one thing about you picking the NFL to cover and me having the NFL here, I see the difference now with what the baseball owner here has inherited for $1.7 billion, which is a sport that doesn't have a media model, that's a completely local, if not regional sport, where they have to go hand to mouth against the Yankees and the Dodgers. And then there's the NFL, where a guy like you would say, any idiot can be a team president in this league. There's $400 million that gets delivered on January 1st, and nobody spends more than 250 or 300 million on expenses. There's just so much money swimming in the NFL that they kind of do whatever they want, including, and this is where I'll let you wear the union hat, the 18th game. Remember when 14 was going to become 16? I know you do. And 16 was going to become 18. The owners can kind of get away with anything they want to get away with at this point, I think.
Just about, because they showed back in 2011 that they'll shut the game down, and the players don't. And a lot of times the players, they're not together, they're not this, they're not that, they're not together like the baseball union was. Well, baseball is a totally different situation, where it takes players longer to get there, and then there's a bit more longevity. Whereas in the NFL, you have more than double the number of players, and you're also going to have guys say, "Oh, we'll be willing to give up a season or give up games." No, we're not going to do that, and the owners know it. So at some point, they will get what they want. And from the media end, I mean, what we see is a creeping, keep it in house, with the team websites, where that's, I don't know if it'll ever get to it, but that's where at some point they want most of the information to be emanated from their websites. We don't want a discouraging word, and they're not going to be able to eliminate it entirely, but you see it with the, sometimes you'll read a story on a team website where the writer had access to a player for quotes and whatever on the story that the rest of the media did not have. I mean, the Cardinals did something about a month ago where, and I'm sure all of them do it. I happen to know, we were actually there, all the media for a press conference, media availability with a player. We were there. And about an hour later, the team announced that I think it was that they had signed one of their draft picks. And we're all going, what? They couldn't have told us that when we were there and we would all have the story and maybe, get a comment or a quote. No, but not only did the team announce it on the website, but this one blew me away, where the Cardinals sent out, I looked at the timestamp on the press release, and I'm going to say it was like 2:03 p.m., right? The team announced the signing of this guy. Then I went to the website, and there was a story on this guy signing with quotes, and the timestamp on that was, guess what? 2:03 p.m. So it was as if they gave the story, they told the writer, hey, we signed this guy, get some quotes, tell us when you're done your story, and have it ready to push the button to publish. And when we push the button to publish the story on the website, we'll push the button on the press release to send to the rest of the meeting. The same exact time. And that's where we are. And it's funny, during
well, the other part is, if you would have scooped that and wrote that, they get punitive. The punitive part of punishing you when when they got punitive with me, Howard, I'll ask you an ethical question here, because this really happened to me. I don't think I've ever brought this up on the air, but I'm going to be writing about it in a couple weeks. Chicago, Illinois, about 10 years ago, and I'll say 10, I don't know exactly when it was, but it was when it was. Up in the press box, they're playing the Bears. We're at Soldier Field, the new Soldier Field with the spaceship on top. And underneath the stadium, I don't remember if the Ravens won or lost, but I was milling about. There was some sort of weirdness in the air in the locker room. And on my way out, Ozzie Newsome was being gurneyed into an ambulance. I had 5 people tell me that Ozzie was not feeling well, under the weather, people that were concerned about him. And I, as a reporter, I witnessed a Hall of Fame player, the guy who runs the organization at the time, being served into the back of an ambulance underneath the stadium. Do I report that or do I not?
I would say you do.
You have to, right? I did. I don't think they were ever the same with me after that. They thought like I had seen something I shouldn't have seen when I was standing in the locker room and people were talking to me about it, but they didn't report it. And they didn't give it to Jamison Hensley, and they didn't give it to Jeff Zrebeck. I reported it. I can tell you, I was at Midway Airport, and Peter King used to be on the Sunday Night Football, and I saw it on the crawl, and Peter credited me in halftime in talking about it, because I had reported that he was going to be fine, but I reported that it was there. So they got angry with me. So, there's a great example of, like, you piss them off and then they eventually throw you out. So it's an amazing thing where we are. But like, your thing's worse. Like, my thing is worse, where people would ask me why I'm the prick reporter, because I saw Bob Irsay take my football team in 1984. I watched Stan Kroenke take your football team 5 minutes ago. I was at the press conference when it happened. So I just, having eyes on these billionaires. Bisciotti hasn't been seen since Ray Rice punched his wife and they all lied about it and tried to get him out on the field. Bisciotti has been evaporated since that point. And that's sort of in line with a lot of the other owners. I mean, Jerry's going to be the last one that speaks to people. I'm convinced of that.
And all he does is put his foot in his mouth when he does that. And the one thing about owners doing whatever they want, and we talked, I know, about the whole Rams back to LA deal many times, but to me,
well, they got sued for $1 billion, right? It would have been a whole lot more money had the lawyers not cashed out St. Louis just to get their check. We went through that. I mean, that's how dirty it is. It was so dirty that he knew that he could leave, get sued, defend himself, and get off the hook in the end, because the lawyers would want to cash the first quarter of $1 billion they get. That would be enough money for the lawyers. They're not going to go all in, which they didn't.
Don't want to go through all the appeals and all that, but the point I was going to make was that there was close to enough votes for the owners to pick the Carson project for the Raiders and the Chargers. And Dean Spanos, who was running the Chargers, only needed like 2 or 3 other votes to totally get it. He had about 21, 22 votes going into the meeting. And so all of a sudden, and this was the epitome of what the owners did, they had a secret vote.
And they screwed him. They screwed
Yeah,
one of their
they
guys.
screwed Spanos because then he wouldn't know which guys turned on him. And it was the second time that I have knowledge of, and I confirm this. It was the second time in the modern day NFL where there was a secret vote. And the other one was back in the day, back in the 80s, I think, when Leonard Toast, the owner of the Eagles, was trying to get a Super Bowl for Philadelphia. And no one wanted, hardly anyone wanted to do that. But he had set, he didn't have enough votes to get it, but he had enough votes to block Pasadena from getting it. They were Philadelphia and Pasadena were the final two. And they kept having ballot after ballot after ballot, and they couldn't get enough votes for Pasadena. Well, they finally had a secret vote, and now all of a sudden, some of those guys in Leonard Toast's hip pocket turned, and the Super Bowl went to Pasadena. So that was a secret vote. Never again until the Rams vote. But I've always said that's one thing to have a secret vote over a Super Bowl, right? When
How
you have
about
a
an
secret,
investigation for millions of dollars about one of your owners sexually exploiting cheerleaders, and have it come to a quiet oral presentation that nobody ever, the truth never came out about Daniel Snyder ever, right?
very true. That's very true. And so, like I said, it's one thing to have a secret vote for a Super Bowl, quite another to have one where it's taking a team from a city and not think twice about it, just to get the final, the final result that they truly wanted.
Well, I mean, I guess this is where it's going to come for me at 55 when I do my Labor Day writings. I'm a man of letters, Howard. I'm writing some letters in early September to the ownership and to the new people running the Orioles and Katie Griggs and all these people. And just like, I fundamentally don't want to believe they're all scumbags, but because I've been in the room with all of them, and because the Colts left and the Bullets left before that, and I didn't want to believe Bisciotti was a scumbag when he was using my restroom downtown and hanging out on my couch, strumming my guitar and drinking my beer. But in the end, as I sit outside, in their diversity, inclusion, and equity side of the media side and seeing what they're doing, I've just come to the grand conclusion that that's what we have here. And I'm not going to play kayfabe and pretend it didn't happen. You can't play kayfabe and say that the Rams are still in St. Louis any more than I can say the Colts are in Baltimore, right? Like, all of this is on record, but it is, they are too big to fail, right?
Totally. Yeah, no doubt about that. I mean, like you pointed out before, the amount of revenue that is in this sport, and it is the classic, the whole embracing of gambling.
Mm.
I mean, this was anathema to the
First thing that
NFL.
would have gotten us thrown out of the league is if you and I were taking numbers. Now everybody's got their picks on Sunday. Now we have 5 Super Bowl MVP quarterbacks throwing their picks out on the weekend. It's crazy.
I've always joked, and it really wasn't a joke, that there was a rule in the NFL that if you worked in the league office and you even uttered the words Las Vegas, you'd probably be fired. And they fought it and fought it and fought it. And finally, when the states voted to have it, and then state after state fell after New Jersey, all of a sudden, now the NFL says, hey, there's revenue here. Oh, we love gambling, right? We love gambling.
It's an amazing thing, Howard, because the way I explain it is this. This is to a 2-year-old, right? Howard, let's you and I get together, okay? We'll create a game. We'll call it Balzer Ball, and we play it with a ball, and we're going to get officials for it, and we're going to get 2 teams, and we're going to get the whole country involved in this, and we're going to adjudicate the game. We're going to set the rules. We're going to buy the policeman for it. We're going to take the money in the bets, and then we're going to settle the bets, and we're going to have a guy we call a referee or an umpire that's going to say you won, you lost, and then it's going to settle billions of dollars of bets every Sunday around 4 o'clock. And you would say, that sounds like a dice game in an alley, dude. Like, literally, that's exactly what it sounds like, right?
Just remember, though, they have all the commercials about betting responsibly.
Well, and I read them, and listen, my dad brought pool cards home from the Point in 1978. It's how I realized Rice was a university and not a food group, in that college thing there, when I would see them on the pool cards. But, I'm with you that there's not gold in the hills. At some point, there's going to be trouble for all the sports. And I talk about basketball, baseball, all of that. Howard, we're too old, dude. I mean, I don't feel like get off my lawn. Here, I'm going to leave you with some good feelings. If you're a Baltimore positive, what do you still love about football?
The game. I mean, still at its heart, it's a great game. It has drama. You really don't ever totally, even though there's people who think they know what's going to happen, you don't know. And it's 17 game season, and that's not a lot of games. There's not a whole lot of difference between winning 7 games and winning 10. All the game. I mean, heck, 55% of the games are 1-score games. And believe it or not, almost 3/4 of the games every year are 1-score games at some point in the fourth quarter. You have incredible athletes, doing their thing. You hate the injury aspect of it because it's going to affect teams. You just can't get away from it. I mean, all these teams you enter training camp feeling great, and then in the back of your mind, you're going, boy, when are the injuries going to start? And boy, do they start. I mean, we're only 2.5 weeks into training camp, basically, and you have guys going down all over the place. So you hate that. You hate it for those players that have to deal with those injuries. But just the whole nature of the sport is it's almost addictive in a lot of ways, and that's what's made it number one by far in our country.
You know what I've had fun with the last couple of years? I collect these crazy Pacifica belt buckles, Rockstar belt buckles, but I've also I have all of my old Houston Oilers stuff. You know what an Oiler idiot I was all of my life and my childhood. I have a big box of all of it. I've never really gotten rid of any of it. And in the modern era, I found an Earl Campbell throwback sweater, full on, looks like a Newt Rockne kind of piece from the 20s or 30s, but it's an Oiler piece. And I had Dan Pastorini on recently with my Dan Pastorini jersey on. So I'm just doing throwback Oilers stuff around here in the way that maybe you even go throwback Cardinals. The most important thing we all know, Howard, is whether the Orioles are going to win the Super Bowl, right? I mean, the World Series. I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah. I mean, who knows? That's
I
the
said
thing.
Orioles win the Super Bowl. That's funny.
You just never know. Everyone buries teams. Oh, it's over for them, and then all of a sudden they get hot or whatever.
You lose 5 pitchers, and then you don't look the same, or your quarterback gets hurt in October, or your quarterback gets hurt in the first quarter of the first game, like Aaron Rodgers last year, right? Like things change quickly, and it's that's the beauty of the NFL.
All sports, and it's the narratives drive me nuts sometimes. So much media, so much TV stuff where you just have to fill segments and you come up with talking points and all those things. But hey, that's kind of the nature of it. And then we all fall into the trap, right? Someone puts out a top 100 list, and it's mostly a bunch of crap. And then you go, well, they're doing it, so we'll talk about it on shows like this or on talk radio. And then you fall into the trap and say, oh, here we are, we're ripping it, but we're talking about it.
Well, the difference for me is we had baseball here for the first time in a long, long time to talk about. So it has been like in St. Louis where you had the Blues a little bit and some other things. Like at least we've had like a real baseball season here, a real era of baseball. So I haven't talked a whole lot of football. We haven't had to do that. The only thing that matters, we all know Patrick Mahomes is the best player in the league because he's the one that keeps winning. And until Lamar can do that, we're going to sit, or Josh Allen or any of the rest of these cats, we're going to have to figure it out. I miss you. I miss hanging out with you. At some point, I'll get to Arizona and we'll figure out some good tacos together or whatnot, or maybe a spring training baseball game or something like that. It is always a pleasure to have you on, and always a pleasure to have your knowledge and your wisdom here. We'll be listening out at Sirius. I'll tell everybody to buy the Lindy's magazine because Luke's in it too. And don't be a stranger here. Come back and visit once in a while, all right?
I don't get back east that much, but hey, we'll put it on the list at some point.
Come back for the Orioles parade.
Yeah, there we go. Always enjoy our discussions.
That's in Philadelphia. I can get in the way first. Howard Balzer, the H-Man. He's a legend. He is a long time insider with the National Football League. I always go back to those fun videos he puts up in the 1983 draft with the ESPN and all that stuff. You can find him out on the interwebs, and you can certainly find him out at Sirius XM Radio from time to time, as well as in the Lindy's magazines, which do a great job. Perfect magazine this time of year to catch up on everything, have it on your desk, take it where you want to go. And I'm old school sometimes. I need a little bit of paper and a pen. I am Nestor. We are WNST, AM 1570, Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore positive.